Wouldn't it be great if you could ask your data anything at any time? Like, how are sales this quarter? How's the new marketing campaign performing? What does the overall health of the company look like? And actually get answers right away with charts and graphics and actionable information. You can with Domo's AI and data products platform. Domo lets you channel AI and data quickly, securely, and innovatively to deliver measurable insights wherever and whenever you need them. Anyone on your team can use Domo to easily prepare, analyze, visualize, automate, and distribute data, all amplified by AI. Domo goes beyond productivity. It's designed to transform your processes, helping you make smarter and faster decisions and drive real growth. All powered by Domo's trust, flexibility, and years of expertise in data and AI innovation. The world's best companies rely on Domo to make smarter decisions. See how Domo can help transform yours. Learn more at ai.domo.com. That's ai.domo.com.
The Agile Brand.
Welcome to Season 6 of the Agile Brand, where we discuss marketing technology and customer experience trends, insights, and ideas with enterprise and technology platform leaders. We focus on the people, processes, data, and platforms that make brands successful, scalable, customer-focused, and sustainable. This is what makes an Agile brand. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom, advising Fortune 1000 brands on MarTech, marketing operations, and CX, best-selling author and speaker. The Agile Brand Podcast is brought to you by TechSystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that my latest book, Priority is Action: 7 Principles for Better Strategies, Decisions, and Outcomes, is now available. In it, I give ideas and insights for leaders and teams that need to make meaningful progress on their priorities. After all, our priorities are what we do, not what we say we'd like to do. You can find Priority is Action on Amazon or learn more on my website, gregkihlstrom.com. Now let's get on to the show. As companies continue to boast AI investments, marketers are struggling to keep up, according to a recent report from customer engagement platform Braze, which finds that less than 50% of marketers are using or intend to use AI in their everyday tasks. At the same time, cross-functional team collaboration is at a standstill, with only 1% of customer engagement being owned by a combination of marketing and technical teams and 25% of customer engagement executed by non-marketers. Today, we're going to talk about how the quality of a brand's digital experience relies on consistent organizational collaboration and iterating on the look and feel of a brand based on customer feedback. To help me discuss these topics, I'd like to welcome Mariam Asmar, VP Strategic Consulting at Braze. Mariam, welcome to the show.
Hey, Greg. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And welcome back to the show at that. So returning champion here. So why don't we get started with you giving a little background on yourself as well as your role at Braze?
Sure. I've been at Braze for almost 3 years now. As you mentioned, I'm the VP of Strategic Consulting, which is part of our go-to-market strategy and operations team. My team looks after kind of creative strategy. We work with clients to make sure they creatively get a lot out of the platform. Business value, so make sure they can articulate the value of what they're getting, and industries marketing as well, which is more, right, what's the value of Braze for some of these different industries?
Great. So yeah, we're going to talk about a few things today, but let's start by talking about the specific collaborative and AI challenges that are facing brands today. Certainly AI is top of many people's minds here. So starting with collaboration and particularly cross-functional team collaboration, we're living in an omni-channel world, right? So, what are some of the challenges that are preventing brands from having greater collaboration across these functional teams for omni-channel?
Number one, it's a good question because I think one of the things we talked about is how some of these themes in the customer engagement report are resurfacing year after year, right?
Yeah.
And so the fact that only 1% of customer engagement is owned by marketing and technical teams, right, makes you say, like, what, the errors to me, it's not the data. It's not that we don't know that it actually needs to happen. It's more human. It's more structural, right? How do teams that maybe historically haven't worked together start working together? How do leaders create space for that to happen? Because I think that we're kind of hitting this point of like everybody knows it needs to be omni-channel, and customers, don't see like your team silos, they just see one brand, and yet we're still kind of like here, talking
Yeah.
about the same problems.
Yeah. And so, obviously lots of variations between different types of organizations, sizes, industries, all of the above. But, what are some approaches that an organization can take to better understand and ideally improve their cross-team collaboration?
Yeah, I think, right, very simple, just like human, right? Use what you know as a human and apply it
Yeah.
to the situation. It's just more frequent communication, right? If you guys aren't speaking the same language, you probably need to interact more, have a little more empathy as you approach the conversations, really try to understand what your counterparts are working on, what you're working on, find some of those areas for overlap. Top performing brands for Braze in terms of customer engagement, they're 82% more likely to involve multiple teams and think about customer engagement on a weekly basis, right? Sharing insights back, passing things around the org. Like, I think that's just, it's funny because it's just something that, again, it's human. It's things that we should know and be able to do. But I think we just get caught up so much with the day to day and getting through the to do list that how do you actually make time and space to do this?
Yeah.
One thing I'll say, I like, in our org, and actually in Braze, our teams we have like OKRs to work cross functionally with different people, or you get kind of like bonused on some of that, right? So I think it's really important for leadership right now to start recognizing what some of the friction, right, that's maybe preventing some of the teams from working together. And how do you help create that space for them to come together and actually, make things?
So we certainly talk a lot about AI on the show. It's been hard to avoid talking about it, even in seemingly unrelated topics for the last year and a half or so. But while AI can have some tangible benefits, according to the report by Braze that I mentioned at the top of the show, according to that same report, how less than half of marketers are either using or intend to use it. So there's still quite a bit of organizations that are not using it. What insights can you give us about why this is the case?
Yeah, I think that, I think people see it really as something, it's a time saver, right? Everyone thinks about AI today as like a time saver. Or there's a million things that people want to do, right? Every org has a couple different use cases that they want to implement. So I think it's important right, I'm going to talk about leadership again, to get involved and create some kind of like prioritization, right? So there's not a really big gap between, use and effective implementation at scale. I would say that today, I don't know, I don't want to say people are running around with their heads cut off, but everyone, right? It's a buzzword. And so when it's a
Right.
buzzword in the marketing world, everybody kind of is like, oh, we got to do it. What does it do? But nobody really knows what it means. You can't have best practices and experimentation at the same time. I think we're still just in this place of people getting used to it, people figuring out how to work it into their day to day. But I do expect that adoption to go up. And I think one thing that we've done, with some of our teams is, do we get a course and force people to
Right.
accelerate their knowledge with it? So again, I think it's really important for leadership to also look at like what's preventing those gaps, particularly within your org. Is it a time issue? Is it, oh, we don't actually know how to use the technology? And then where do you need to invest or release a little bit of friction so some of that can flow smoother?
Yeah. And it's we're in March of the year here, and I said something a few months back about last year was kind of the year for experimentation and stuff like that, and that this year was going to be the year of reconciliation and putting the guardrails in place and greater adoption and things like that. But it's feeling a bit premature based on what you're saying and what I'm seeing as well. But assuming that leaders have a good understanding of what good use of AI and beneficial use of AI is, what can leaders do to enable broader usage of AI to benefit their marketing teams and as well as their customers?
I think there's a lot of different, and again, I think it's important for leaders to really understand like what are the blockers on their teams, right? So if you're
Yeah.
not, for example, if your team hasn't embraced content yet in any way, right? How do you start doing that? What are some of the areas right now that you can start testing in? So really, I think helping people to understand like what are rich areas for testing and like understanding in the team is one area to think about for marketers. So content. I think about not just content generation, but tone of voice, right? So to your point of like last year was the year of experimentation and this year's year of reconciliation. I would say it takes more than a year to build a product, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you put something in there and then you got to constantly learn from it. A brand tone of voice, you're not going to crack that in a year. I think that's one of the areas that I hear all creative, directors or people still really struggling with. But that's something that I would say like, oh, start investing in that today and start working on it. And you've got to just refine it over time.
Yeah.
So I think, that's one area. I think the other thing is we all have so much to do in our orgs. How do organizations like cross-functionally start to make AI kind of interesting and fun for everybody in the company? Like at Braze, we actually have like hackathons with AI and like creative teams, product teams, content teams, right? Everybody comes and has like free time to basically build and experiment and try different solutions.
Yeah.
And so I think, right, sometimes it's training. Sometimes it's like creating space, right? Sometimes it's like bringing fun or engaging aspects to it. No formula, right? And that's the art of leadership is like knowing kind of what your org really needs and trying to push it forward.
Yeah. And I think that's also, it's almost like I know it's cliched, but it's that 1+1=3 kind of thing where it's, AI can be beneficial, cross-functional teams can be beneficial, but, couldn't it be better if they were both used together? And, you mentioned a few examples of that as well, even just, with the hackathons and things like that. But, any other maybe opportunities or just ways of thinking that leaders should think about in terms of, bringing those two concepts together of cross-functional teams and better and more, better AI adoption?
Yeah, I think that, right, I think there's like a little bit of a data reckoning that also has to happen with AI, which is today a lot of orgs sit on a lot of data. It doesn't necessarily all work together in one
Yeah.
place, getting activated in real time. I think for people to realize the promise of AI, right? Your AI is going to come from data and you're going to need your company data as like a key input for your internal systems to start making decisions. So I also think internally, if you haven't cracked that yet, where your data all comes together and has value and can be activated, like that's absolutely something that cross-functionally everyone has an interest in solving and working together.
Wouldn't it be great if you could ask your data anything at any time? Like, how are sales this quarter? How's the new marketing campaign performing? What does the overall health of the company look like? And actually get answers right away with charts and graphics and actionable information. You can with Domo's AI and data products platform. Domo lets you channel AI and data quickly, securely, and innovatively to deliver measurable insights wherever and whenever you need them. Anyone on your team can use Domo to easily prepare, analyze, visualize, automate, and distribute data, all amplified by AI. Domo goes beyond productivity. It's designed to transform your processes, helping you make smarter and faster decisions and drive real growth, all powered by Domo's trust, flexibility, and years of expertise in data and AI innovation. The world's best companies rely on Domo to make smarter decisions. See how Domo can help transform yours. Learn more at ai.domo.com. That's ai.domo.com.
And so as AI, obviously, first of all, AI has been around for decades, so it's not like it's a new thing, right? But it's, it seems like we're talking about it in new ways and perhaps in new ways in relation to a lot of different types of jobs. We've seen like the prompt engineer that's like making a sweet salary and things like that. But, what do you see as, after a little bit of this hype dies down and stuff, what do you see as the role of the employer as far as, is it on the employer to educate their employees about AI tools and, anything from prompts to, other types of AI and approaches? Or is this really going to be something where, it's like you have to know how to use Microsoft Word or the internet to have a good job? where do you think, or maybe somewhere in between, where do you see this fitting in the next maybe a couple of years?
Yeah, I definitely think, there is a role of the employer to train in some way. And like I said, if you're not going to invest in training and upskills, right, create space for people
Yeah.
to think about it and work
Yeah.
on projects. I think, I remember doing a lot of work in the marketing world when social media first came in, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I remember marketers were like, oh, just, we'll just reallocate these marketers to that other marketing job and it'll be fine. It's like,
Right.
no, like these are new tools, like new systems. Like not everyone can walk up and like execute a sophisticated like media buy. So I
Mhm.
definitely think if you're an employee, you should be, just from your own as a human being, like leveling up and learning more about AI and how, the different platforms that are available to you. But if you're an employer, it's a bit naive, I think, to think that you can do nothing and it's
Yeah.
on, put the onus on your workforce to figure it out, because I would argue that's not really good for your business long term. So
Yeah.
it's got to be a blend of both. I don't think you should shoulder the full thing. It's not, spoon feeding people, but making sure, like I said, there are moments, there's education, resources that people need to up level themselves. Otherwise, you're going to end up in kind of one of those situations. And if
Yeah.
it's really hard to come back from having a slow start. So I would just encourage people to get the foundations right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And so as far as, measurement of success here, I mean, marketing teams are held to marketing metrics and CX teams, same equivalent, so beyond those types of measures, how do you look at measuring growth and success, whether it's AI adoption, cross-functional, it's sort of the meta, the meta success here, how do you look at that, as well as, is it incremental, is it, how do you measure collaboration, in other words, like, or are there other ways to think about this?
Well, I think we spoke about it, right. You can't have best practices and experimentation at the same time. So number one, I think always having like the learn it, what you learned, right? It's
Yeah.
never bad if you do stuff. It's
Yeah.
just bad if you don't learn something. So
Yeah.
making sure you share those. I think with any marketer, right, there's a short term and long term angle to it. So short term, you got to show maybe, oh, you're solving, what problems are you solving? Something you're focusing on a use case that's historically taken a lot of your time, right? You can prove efficiency in that. But
Yeah.
long term, it's all about like effectiveness, right? Tone of voice is something I spoke about. You're not going to crack that and have short term metrics for it today. But if you spend 2 years or something investing in it, long term, there's going to have some effectiveness and savings there that, right, anybody would be impressed or happy to be pointed towards. So always kind of keeping, I think, an eye on both and knowing what you can communicate as a marketer for your short term wins, but always with an eye on like that long term value that you're trying to create for the company is kind of my strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, we have kind of touched on this a little bit, but, I want to talk a little bit more about expectations of results. And it changes, never easy. Sometimes it happens more successfully, more quickly, but when it comes to thinking about cross-functional teams augmenting, I know you kind of touched on this, but leaders that are, they report to somebody too, and there's expectations there, how would you recommend that they set reasonable expectations on how quickly some of this stuff happens, given what you're saying is like we do need to experiment without guaranteeing result? Part of experiments are that you're not always successful, but you always learn, right? So like how would you recommend that they set those realistic expectations with their, with who they report to?
Yeah. Well, number one, like with anything, it's like have a strategy, right?
Yeah.
Don't just go in with a list of stuff you're doing. That list of stuff should marry to problems or pain points in some way that I'm
Yeah.
sure you have metrics or something, some sort of metric that you can point to indicate that maybe things aren't going well,
Yeah.
right? So go in with what you're trying to solve. What are all the different ways that you can try to solve them? Again, our org does this. Like, here's all the use cases that we think we need as a team to make ourselves like more efficient. And it's my boss's, our leadership's job to come in and say, all right, I think these are the 5 things that you should go in and tackle or look at. And that's where you're then trying to get learnings, right? So you shouldn't be just doing it kind of in a silo. It should align to sort of this wider strategy, hopefully one that's aligned to the company, right?
Yeah.
There's not a company out there right now that's not trying to drive efficiency.
Right.
So I think finding whatever area is kind of weighing you down the most, or what's a big pain point, and focusing on something like that, it's not going to lead you to a bad place. Again, if you learn that that's a dead end, well, it's great that you learned that today,
Yeah.
and that will save you time down the line. So I think just, again, kind of managing the short term and long term, trying to be very deliberate and articulate, with what you're doing and why you're doing it is just a good way to keep everyone, I'd say, on side and not feeling like you're just
Yeah.
running like frivolous AI experiments in the corner.
Right. Well, and as we're talking about this, I'm wondering, it's like some of what you're totally agree with what you're saying, but what I'm wondering is a lot of this sounds like best practices for having just a general culture of experimentation. And so I guess I'm wondering, is AI and the hype, is that almost a blocker to just doing things the right way? You know what I mean? Like, are people stuck on the term and the hype, and really what they should be doing is just what you've been saying here, is like, get these fundamentals right, and then you can plug in AI, you can plug in, choose the buzzword of next year or whatever. Like, is that tracking?
Yes and no, right? I think that AI is going to allow us to kind of what I mentioned, like the efficiency, like
Yeah.
it's going to help us solve some of these problems faster. And that's sometimes why we don't solve them, is they feel so daunting, that we're like, oh, like,
Yeah.
how do I deal with that? Right. So this kind of starts to give you a little bit of an out to figure out some of your problems. I'd argue for the last, right, God knows how many years, we probably haven't been doing things the right way, right? Tech teams have gone and spent a bunch of money on tech, hasn't necessarily aligned with marketing or the media teams on how that's being funneled back. So because everybody has an interest in making AI work, and you've got to get the data part right to make AI truly valuable for your company, I think it's almost like forcing this moment of people starting to come together because they all need each other
Yeah.
now. I would also say too, right? I think more of those engagement practitioners are probably focused on some of the basics that you and I spoke about. I think kind of some of those brand marketers have gotten out there and tried to experiment with different things of like, what do people like? Oh, here, generate your, Colgate, generate your smile. Burger King says, come generate your Whopper using AI. So what I also really like is kind of being inspired by other functions that are diving into it. And maybe they're not diving into it with the most sophisticated models of data or anything, but at least they're starting to test with like what consumers want to engage with and have fun with from that standpoint. And I think they're a good cohort of folks to keep your eye on as well, because there's some good inspiration there. If you want to create a 1+1=3 situation, right? Maybe you're going a little bit more beyond the basics. So
Yeah.
get the basics right, but you still got to come in with a big ambition.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Well, Mariam, thanks so much for joining the show. One last question before we wrap up here. Given a lot of great insights and advice already, for those listening today, like what they hear, what's one next best action that you recommend that somebody could do today to start improving collaboration or, augmentation of AI, either one or both, that they could take away today?
Yeah, I think, I think meetings between marketers and technical teams need to increase.
Yeah.
And the next one should start with both teams highlighting to each other how AI is helping them complete specific tasks, right?
Yeah.
So just, again, let's start with the basics. Let's just like talk to each other about what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Yeah, love that. Well, again, I'd like to thank Mariam Asmar, VP Strategic Consulting at Braze, for joining the show. You can learn more about Mariam and Braze, as well as get a link to download the report by Braze by following the links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening to The Agile Brand, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.gregkillstrom.com. That's GregKihlstrom.com. While you're there, check out my series of best-selling Agile Brand guides, covering a wide variety of marketing technology topics, or you can search for Greg Kihlstrom on Amazon. The Agile Brand is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Until next time, stay agile.
The Agile brand.